Well, good afternoon and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is your weekly call-in town hall and radio show, 2.5 years and running. I'll be on the air for the next hour to answer your questions. I'm here each Friday, so you can tune in, you can listen, and I'm going to take your call on the air. Love to get your thoughts on issues that are important to you. The number here at the studio is 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366. Again, I'm State Senator Amanda Chase. I'm your weekly radio show host. I serve you at the state level, not to be confused with the swamp in D.C. My office is at the state capitol in downtown Richmond, and what a busy week it's been. Monday, I was actually filing legislation, my first initial pieces of legislation. Hopefully, we'll get to talk about that at some point. I had 3 commission meetings approving block grants for the state of Virginia, $113 million in block grant money. So it's been a busy week. We've looked at anything from poverty issues, how to address poverty in Virginia, to civic education. So it's been a busy week. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time and you're like, who is this? Who am I listening to? I represent you in the state Senate. This is my first term in office. I am not a politician. I'm actually a small business owner. My family and I have owned businesses over the past 20 plus years. And I'm actually getting ready to complete I just finished my 3rd session. My last session is coming up and I run for re-election next year. I represent the 11th senatorial district, which is most of Chesterfield, all of Colonial Heights, and all of Amelia County. I'm a Christian, conservative, Republican in that order, and I say that unabashedly. Vice President Mike Pence used that line, and I liked it so much that I borrow that line from him every week. I ran on term limiting career politicians and returning the government back to the people. And if you look at most of the legislation that I've successfully been able to get through the General Assembly, most of it has to do with just that. One of the pieces of legislation that I just refiled again is a term limiting piece of legislation, along with if you're going to run for governor, you basically have to live as a resident and be a Virginian for 8 years and before you can actually run for governor. So I've refiled that one as well. I'm going to go ahead and cut to the chase because I have 2 really wonderful guests here in the studio today. You're going to be really glad you listened and tuned in today. I have John Childrey, who is the Chesterfield County Deputy Commonwealth Attorney, along with Kevin Carroll, who is the president of the Fraternal Order of Police of Virginia. And they've been on the show a couple times before, on the town hall before. And John, I hear that you're running for office.
Senator Chase, thank you so much for having me here. It is my pleasure to be here with you, with a senator that is so responsive to folks, your constituents. I know we're going to talk about some legislation, and I've had meetings with you, and so has Kevin Carroll about new legislation. So that's very exciting. And yes, you're correct. I'm running for the office of Commonwealth Attorney. Like you, Senator Chase, I'm not a politician. I consider myself a professional prosecutor. I'm involved in public safety. But yes, my longtime boss, Billy Davenport, has stepped away from a position he occupied for 30 plus years. And so it is my goal to fill his shoes, which are really big shoes. And again, thank you for having me on the show.
Now, if I understand correctly, he has actually endorsed you to be his successor, is correct?
Absolutely. He's endorsed me, and there's no one else that's in the office. It's an office of 26 or 27 attorneys. We're just losing one. And no one else in the office is interested in running. I've gotten a lot of support from within the office. I think everyone there is hopeful that I can become the next Commonwealth Attorney and continue kind of the ship that Billy Davenport put together. It's a ship I think functions well for the people here in Chesterfield and the criminal justice agencies that we touch. So it's my goal to be the next Commonwealth Attorney.
Now, I know that everyday average listener, they may not be familiar with what a Commonwealth Attorney does. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your role and responsibilities?
Sure. Well, in Virginia, we're a Commonwealth, and a lot of states call this role the DA. The U.S. Attorney is the prosecutor that prosecutes folks that violate federal statutes. In Chesterfield, like every other jurisdiction in Virginia, there's an elected official called the Commonwealth Attorney. And he has a staff if it's a larger jurisdiction. Sometimes it's just him if it's a smaller place. But he is the person that in Virginia is ultimately responsible for the criminal prosecution of folks that violate state statutes or local ordinances. So it's a fairly big responsibility. Also, it's not under the Office of the Attorney General structurally. So it's really an important position. It is one that needs to be handled by a professional, someone who knows what it is to prosecute. And I believe I'm the most qualified person, and I look forward to this campaign. Thank you.
So let me ask you, what would you say to the average listener? What are the maybe top 3 issues that you see in the Commonwealth's attorney, if you had to give an example?
Well, we advise the police department. Police department and the Chesterfield County Police Department is a large agency. They provide the bulk of the investigative work in Chesterfield. So we give advice to the police department. We help them get search warrants. We give them legal updates. We keep them abreast of changes in the law, of new trends, of cases that might come out from the Court of Appeals that could affect the way that they need to interact with citizens. Things that were legal today may be ruled unconstitutional tomorrow, and you need to have a Commonwealth Attorney and a Commonwealth Attorney's office that is aware of those situations and can communicate that effectively to the police. We also, of course, deal with the state police, conservation police, Virginia State University police, and some task forces that we're involved with as well. So, yeah.
Very good. Now, I know that you have worked for the Attorney General's office. You worked for Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli back whenever he was Attorney General. Tell me what your role was.
Well, Ken Cuccinelli was the Attorney General, and in 2012, I'd been with the Commonwealth Attorney's office since 1998. He called me on a Monday, and he said he wanted me to be downtown to work for him. And it was quite a transition. I ultimately went downtown. I worked for him. I was the Deputy Attorney General for Public Safety and Enforcement, which in that role, I supervised 175 employees. That division of the AG's office is the largest division by far, comprising about 38% of the employees, 48% of the budget of the entire Attorney General's office. And it was a very, very big role. I reported to 2 people in that position, the Chief Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General. I served in that role for a year and a half, which was a fantastic experience. It really allowed me to have a lot of contacts that are going to really help me be a more effective Commonwealth Attorney. And after Ken Cuccinelli's term ended, I came back to Chesterfield to, again, help the public safety community here in Chesterfield.
Now, I understand you have a Republican opponent and you also have a Democratic opponent. And tell me, what competitive edge do you feel that you have above your opponent?
Well, a great question. There are 3 people that have announced for the race, and my immediate opponent is a woman that is an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Henrico County. Her name is Stacey Davenport. I've met her on a couple of occasions. I'm fairly certain she's never prosecuted a case in Chesterfield County. So that's really, I think, what my edge over Ms. Davenport is. And she has no relation to Billy Davenport. Just want to clear that up. I've been in the courthouse since 1998, with the exception of the time I was at the AG's office, building relationships and connections with and mutual respect for the judges and the police officers that we work with, the sheriff's department, the clerks of court, the folks that work in the community corrections, the probation officers, the magistrates. They all know me. They've all worked with me. They all trust me. They all, I believe, find me somebody of sound judgment, someone who they can rely on to give them accurate answers. It's just been, 20 years I've been involved in this community here in Chesterfield, and that is the primary edge. There will be no learning curve. There will be no need to establish relationships and establish respect and establish trust. It's already there. So that's the number one advantage. I have over her. The Democrat opponent that we anticipate is going to run is a attorney named Scott Miles. He's a defense attorney. He has no experience prosecuting in Chesterfield County. He has some experience, I think, in the city of Richmond. I know him. I've had some cases with him. My understanding is he has said that the way Chesterfield treats nonviolent offenders is inhumane. So I think he and I may have some philosophical differences about how cases are handled.
Very good. And we're getting ready to go to a break. Before we do, if people want to look at your issues, do you have a website?
I do. It's www.childrey4ca. That's the number 4ca.com.
You know, man, if one thing I can add into that John left out is the people. All of those people, all those cases that he just talked about, he was representing the interest of a victim of crime. And so it wasn't just working with the police. It was also getting something taken care of for someone who was a victim. It may have been their very first time. They've never been a victim before. That's very important.
We'll be right back with John Childrey and Kevin Carroll. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after the break. All right. Thanks for tuning in again to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase. I represent you all in the General Assembly. And I am joined here in the studio with John Childrey, who is the Deputy Commonwealth Attorney for Chesterfield County, and also my good friend Kevin Carroll, who is the President of the Fraternal Order of Police of Virginia. And they're both here in the studio today. And, you know, Chesterfield, it's important. We want to have a safe community. I'm a mom with 4 kids, 3 still living here in Virginia. And all of us want to have a safe place to live, safe communities. Public safety is so important. And it's so important to have really good leadership at the top and good experienced leadership at the top. John, you have been with Billy Davenport, our former Commonwealth Attorney, who has served for over 3 decades. You've been under his tutelage, and he's done a great job keeping Chesterfield safe. Tell us those things that you feel that you would want to continue as a practice in the Commonwealth Attorney's office, and maybe some things that you might change.
Sure, and this is something I've talked to the Chesterfield Police Chief about, Jeffrey Katz. I would like to see a little more focus on investigating crimes that are committed against elderly victims. I think there are some financial crimes that are taking place. I think there's some fraud crimes that are taking place. And as our community gets older, and I think that's a trend, we're going to see more and more of these folks that are vulnerable to some sorts of financial fraudsters. And there needs to be, I think, a concerted effort by both the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and the Police Department to be able to investigate these situations and really help these victims. That's really the job of the Commonwealth Attorney, is to explain the legal process to victims that may not be able to, go to court very much, and they really don't know what's going on. So the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, along with the Victim Witness Assistance Office, needs to be able to give them guidance and give them as much comfort as possible so that they are not re-victimized again by the criminal justice system. So that's a big role that Billy has emphasized. I'm going to continue that, but maybe in a emphasis on a little different style of case, different type of case.
Very good. And I understand, and I know that this has been an issue about misdemeanors. And I know we've talked with our listeners a lot about the body cam issue and the lack of funding that we've had with the state for the past 10 years in trying to get funding in general to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And just so you all know, the state actually provides some funding to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. They do to all the constitutional officers. And the reason for that is because they are elected positions, and we don't ever want to have a situation in which the county government depletes that fund if they don't like what you're doing politically, defund you and make you look bad or fail. You know, that would be really bad if all your staff suddenly lost all their, you lost your budget and everything. So the state comes in and we provide money to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. But unfortunately, that funding has not been at 100% for at least a decade. And then we add on top of that the body cams, which actually turned out to be a more expensive proposition than we anticipated. And I think we're all in support of body cams. I mean, Kevin, I know we've talked about the research about how effective body cams are.
Well, I mean, and certainly when an officer has a camera on and you're recording an incident as it occurs, it gives you best evidence to present before a judge and a jury. And even when you talk about complaints against a law enforcement officer, having that body camera footage could either exonerate the officer or not exonerate the officer. So it really holds the officer accountable for his actions while the camera is rolling, and it holds the citizens accountable for his actions while it's rolling. And sometimes, actually, it helps to de-escalate situations because people who had maybe thought about acting up or doing something different, when they see the camera and realize that it's being recorded, will say, I don't want to do that. So it's good for accountability. Best evidence and for court, when a judge or a jury can actually watch footage of the incident as it unfolds, whether it be a DUI traffic stop and you're trying to determine whether or not someone was intoxicated when the officer actually pulled them over. And so it's best evidence. We used to do this with just an audio recording where we didn't have body cams, but we had micro recorders. And so it's really a great tool, but is an expensive tool, and it's a time-consuming tool because of the fact that every time you run a camera, it creates exculpatory or inculpatory evidence that has to be reviewed by a Commonwealth attorney before it's presented in court so that they know exactly what's on there. And, of course, the officers do brief the Commonwealth what's on it, but they still have a responsibility to review it.
Very good. And we have a caller, Josie. Are you there?
Hello, good evening to both of you. I'm one of those elderly people that was scammed big time by a contractor from the Chesterfield area. I'm in Richmond, but it goes beyond even the small claims court at this point. And I have a solution for all of these kinds of problems, not just mine, and that is that we just do what they've done in other places like Portugal, and I believe Switzerland, but for sure Portugal, where they just have gotten rid of all drug laws, all of them. And so therefore the drugs aren't worth anything anymore. The opiate problem has gone down to almost zero. And I really believe that we would save a lot of law enforcement work and extra energy to go after people like this. And he was such a nice guy, this contractor. I'm so disappointed. I really trusted him, and I'm telling you, the trust was gone. But because that's what happens when you're on drugs, the trust just goes away, and he steals, and that's what he did.
Well, Josie, thanks so much for calling in. And I think what Josie is saying is, we have a number of people out there we have an opioid heroin crisis. There's more people dying of opioid and heroin overdose than even car accidents. And so when you have these individuals who are addicted and they are looking for opportunities to get money, they look for weak victims. And so they're going to go for the elderly. And so, and there's a lot of debate on, opportunities as far as, I was talking to someone the other day about the different, there's recreational marijuana, there's medical marijuana, there's pharmacy board regulated marijuana, there's all I can't say that word, cannabidiol oil.
Cannabinoids.
There you go. We're going to practice saying that over and over till I get it right. So, there's different opportunities out there. And I think what Josie is saying is, we've talked before. I actually know Josie, and in some cases when people are dealing with pain, we see a lot of veterans who maybe have PTSD I've also seen children with seizures. Sometimes they're prescribed these opioids. And so the belief is maybe, we allow, some type of deregulation of drugs. I don't know that. I know I don't agree with all of that. I've always supported the pharmacy board regulated medical use, in which a doctor is definitely overseeing the prescription, basically like any other drug that's given out there. But appreciate you calling in, Josie, and I'm very sorry that you were scammed. And so It's elderly abuse is definitely an issue.
Well, Josie has hit on something that's pretty prevalent. Folks that are addicted to drugs, they will commit crimes to get those drugs. They'll steal from their friends, their family, their coworkers. They'll steal from strangers. They'll take advantage of people, and it's to feed their addiction. And so, Josie, I'm sorry you've gone through that. Hopefully you've called the police. If you were in Richmond when you contracted, you'd probably want to start with Richmond Police Department. And, the issue of should drugs be legal or illegal, that's really outside the scope of what the Commonwealth Attorney's Office does. We are given the laws that the state passes or the county ordinances, and we go forward. And we try to prove the case as we can. So sorry that you've gone through that, Josie. There is a statute, I think it's 18.2, 200.1, which is construction fraud, and it sets forth elements. And there's some things you need to do to make sure somebody is held accountable. So contact the Victim Witness Office in Richmond and the Richmond Police Department, and hopefully that situation can get resolved. Thank you.
All right, stay tuned. We'll be back with more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. Welcome back to more Cut to the Chase with State Senator Amanda Chase. I also have the Chief Deputy Commonwealth Attorney in Chesterfield County, John Childrey. Also, Kevin Carroll, who is the President of the Fraternal Order of Police of Virginia with 32 years law experience. And, one thing that I did want to talk about, because it's been in the paper a lot with the whole body cam issue and the funding issue for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office has been in the paper a lot. The Chesterfield Commonwealth Attorney's Office will be prosecuting fewer misdemeanor charges and traffic infractions. I think that was starting Tuesday, May the 1st, but we have late-breaking news as of today. What is that late-breaking news, John?
Well, since this situation developed, and I'll go into it a little bit here, it's been a very difficult issue to solve. Once I think all the stakeholders understood that there was really a staffing issue that needed to be addressed, we'd kind of moved through the budget cycle. And so it's kind of hard to respond nimbly when you need to add 3 or 4 attorney positions in an office. It's just not it's difficult to do. And as you mentioned earlier, the Commonwealth attorneys are funded some by state sources, some by local sources. So that kind of added another level of complexity. But my understanding is that there has been some agreement reached where the county is going to fund some more positions. And this is the information. I wasn't involved in the negotiations. The current acting Commonwealth attorney, Ken Nichols, has been in negotiations since Billy Davenport retired. And my understanding is there's going to be some folks hired, and we're going to be able to go in and resume handling the misdemeanors. I've done misdemeanors for 20 years. It's something I'm used to, something I think is very, very important to stand next to a victim in the courtroom and explain to the judge why justice requires this defendant that victimized the person be punished for it. Without a Commonwealth attorney there, the victim feels helpless. The police department has been frustrated because they have had to present evidence without a Commonwealth attorney to explain the legalities to the court. So it's been a difficult issue since May 1st. But, here we are in mid-July, and I think there's a resolution that's been come to. At least I hope so. I haven't seen the particulars of it because, as you said, I just personally found out about it after I got out of court today. I was in court this morning. So Kevin may have some more information.
Well, if I can digress just a little bit, one of the other things that's so important about the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is not just the prosecution of misdemeanors, but, we have bad things that happen in our society, and occasionally these cases are major incidents that occur where a domestic shooting may take place and someone gets killed, or a drug dealer, or we've had even murder for hires in the past in Chesterfield County. And having experienced prosecutors there to make sure that a case is litigated properly is key. Recently in Chesterfield, one of the distinctions that we have is we recently had 2 successful no-body prosecutions where the body of the victim was not found, but yet our Commonwealth Attorney's Office was able to present a case and get a conviction in both. And that is very, very, very unique, not just in Chesterfield, not just in Virginia, but in the country. that speaks to the level of expertise that we have in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office right now. And that's why it's so important to make sure we have a tenured, intelligent, experienced leader there. Because when these cases come up, you get one shot, and you want to make sure it's prosecuted right, and you want to make sure that when it goes forward, because any conviction is going to get appealed all the way up, that everything's done correctly so nothing gets overturned on appeal. And so it's key. So we're very lucky. My 32 years here, we have really had a tremendous relationship with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I worked major case for years. I worked homicide cases, prosecuted cases with Billy and with Warren. And so we're very fortunate, and we just need to make sure we keep the right people in there in the future.
Very good. So that answered the question, because I know some people had approached me on Facebook and said, your opponent was saying, I'm going to start prosecuting all misdemeanors again. So that's already happening.
It's going to. August 1st.
Right.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So that takes that issue off the table, in my opinion. So let's just talk about the recent news that you got last night. You were just endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. So I want to, first of all, some people may not know, Kevin, what the FOP is, what they do, kind of what they represent. So I don't want to take that for granted. Tell us about your organization.
Sure. So the Fraternal Order of Police is the largest law enforcement association in the world with over 330,000 members across the United States. We also have a lodge in Ireland and England. So it's a fraternal organization founded actually in 1915 by two Pittsburgh police officers who didn't want to form a union, but they wanted to have some type of association that would be able to lobby for better wages, better uniforms, better equipment, cars, things like that. I guess not back then, but now. So the state FOP was founded here in the 50s in Virginia, and our lodge here was founded in 1981. I've served as the local lodge president for 16 years, and I've served at the state lodge in many different capacities, but specifically the last 4 years as the state president. So last night we had our local lodge meeting here in Chesterfield. FOP Lodge 47 meets. We have our associate lodge, which is made up of civilians from the community who want to support the FOP, and our auxiliary lodge, which is made up of family members of law enforcement officers who are part of the FOP. And at the meeting last night, I spoke to my membership about John, and of course, most of the law enforcement officers know him because we've worked together over the years. And it was voted on last night. A motion was made for the lodge to endorse John in his campaign to be Commonwealth Attorney. And
what would you say were the top qualifications or the top reasons that they supported John?
Well, I mean, there's so many and so many to talk about there, but I would say that, number one, his relationship that he has with many of our members, many of the members for the Fraternal Order of Police, members of the police department. So those relationships and knowing what his skill level is, what he's done for the community.
Very good. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Lately, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we...
Well, thanks for tuning in again to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. I'm here in the studio with John Childrey and Kevin Carroll. And, one thing that I do want to add, Virginia was ranked top state for business due to regulatory reform. We were actually ranked number 4 by CNBC. We were ranked number 4 of the top business-friendly states in the country. And actually, partly thanks to legislation, Americans for Prosperity, the Virginia advocated for this past legislative session. And Delegate Webert, who is in the House, and actually myself, sponsored this legislation. It created regulatory reduction pilot program, and it's going to cut bureaucratic red tape. And that's going to keep Virginia businesses and entrepreneurs thriving. We're getting rid of some of that red tape in there. It's a pilot program. The legislation passed both chambers with bipartisan support and was signed by Governor Northam in March. So I've been working really hard for you all. And so I appreciate State Director J.C. Hernandez for giving us a shout out for working hard and getting that legislation passed. I know that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but it is relevant and in the news. So I wanted to talk about that. The final segment of the show, we've got about 20 minutes left. I'm in the process of filing legislation for the upcoming 2019 legislative session. I've already filed my first probably 10 pieces of legislation, and I appreciate you all emailing my office for ideas, and we're actually going to bring up some of those today on the show, and one of those is by a police officer, and his suggestion for legislation is this. He says, currently law enforcement cannot arrest for any misdemeanor not committed in their presence unless it is listed as an exception. And so the example he gives is if an officer goes to a residence because the homeowner's house was vandalized by the neighbor under $1,000, making it a misdemeanor, and there is a video footage of the incident, and when the neighbor is questioned by law enforcement, the police officer must leave the scene, go to the magistrate's office, and swear out a warrant instead of taking immediate action, such as custodial arrest or writing a summons. Now, the exceptions to this code only permit custodial arrest, and it does not permit a law enforcement officer to issue a summons for an appearance in court, when that would be appropriate in many cases, like brandishing a firearm, assault and battery, carrying a weapon on school property, vandalism to commercial property only. So, John, let me get your opinion on that.
So there are, of course, the officer can make sure that the person does get arrested. He just, in certain circumstances, can't arrest the person himself unless he saw the crime. I think that's ultimately serves as a protection, really, to a law enforcement officer. If the law would allow officers to arrest somebody, actually put their hands on them and arrest them for crimes they didn't witness, I think that could be subject to abuse. There could be folks that tell a police officer, hey, this person committed a crime, and the officer has no reason to disbelieve the person, takes action and actually arrests somebody based on what the officer was told, and turns out that was a hoax or something that the person just made up because they don't like the person. I think having to go to a magistrate and swear out a warrant, and what that means is you tell a magistrate under oath the facts, and if the magistrate issues an arrest warrant, that's a level of, I guess, insulation from the police officer who may, you don't know, might get sued for arresting somebody based on the word of a citizen. Now, there are exceptions. You can arrest somebody for driving under the influence, whether or not that offense was committed in the officer's presence, if the officer has probable cause to believe that that offense occurred. And that's a real public safety imperative. There are lots of folks who wreck their car. The officer comes upon the car. It's in the ditch. The person is walking down the street, and the officer can arrest somebody wherever they're found now for a DUI. You used to have to take them back to the scene of the accident, but even that has been relaxed, and that's no longer the case. So, you have some thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, it's interesting that Virginia is only one of 5 states in the country that actually allows release on a summons. In 1972, U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the U.S. versus Robinson that officers can make custodial arrests for jailable offenses and search incident to arrest. But Virginia, is because of the things that John just talked about, has said that we want to be a little more conservative in our approach. Now, we did try and get that changed years ago in the General Assembly. Jackson Miller carried legislation for us, which would have changed our release on a summons from shall to may, which the General Assembly did not pass that legislation. And the exemptions of a 19.2-81 that you talked about for the release for the custodial arrest. And the interesting thing is in that code, the officer's exactly right. If you're going to make an arrest for those exemptions, the only one that you can release on a summons is shoplifting or concealment. All of those other exemptions, you actually have to make a custodial arrest and take that person to jail. We had an incident come up in the last session where they carried legislation to change this. It didn't move forward because you're talking about exempting a tremendous amount of misdemeanor cases that the officers would now have the discretion to make on. And if someone's lying to the officer about what happened and they're going based on just that probable cause of what the person's saying, the officer could make an arrest that they shouldn't have. And so Virginia is one of 5 states that has been more conservative in its approach. There are many states, if you go up north, as an example, where they actually can make the custodial arrest for the misdemeanors not committed in their presence, and they have issues.
Very good. So that was a great suggestion, but probably one I'm not going to carry based on the advice I'm getting here. A second request here, this individual who is also a police officer says, I would penalize for not reporting damage that you cause. And he gives an example. A friend of mine had the following incident happen. A neighbor's golf cart ran away because the brake was not set. It ran into his house while he was at the beach. Luckily, a neighborhood kid saw it and told him when he got back. The neighbor never told him the neighbor never told him trying to get away with it. It is not vandalism because there's no intent to commit the vandalism. It is not a hit and run because a golf cart is not a motor vehicle and it happened on private property. So we're going to, in other words, the question is, are we going to create some penalty for not reporting a crime?
There are some property crimes that I would say fall into the category of accidents happen. And there's a civil process where lots of these things can get addressed. If a golf cart and the brake fails and it rolls down your driveway and it hits your neighbor's car, certainly you should go to your neighbor and say, hey, sorry this happened. Let me, get you in touch with my homeowner's insurance. What can I do to make this right? Well, everybody's not like that. And just because there are some folks out there that don't behave like they should as a good neighbor would, I don't know that rises to the level of, well, if you don't tell your neighbor about the accident that happened, then you should be a criminal and you should be subjected to potentially a year in jail, which is the penalty for a vandalism crime because you didn't report something that wasn't criminal in the first place. Accidents happen. Folks have trees that fall over into their neighbor's yard and smash cars. Doors catch people's fingers, accidents do happen. And I think it's a slippery slope to try to criminalize behavior that's just, things that happen that shouldn't.
Stuff happens, right?
Absolutely.
So basically, Kevin, do you have any comments on that at all?
Well, I understand what the frustration that the officer is looking at because you have someone who's a victim of crime who's called the police that is frustrated because something was damaged of theirs. In this case, luckily, in that case, that someone did witness it and reported it forward. But, we review cases every day, hit-and-run cases where people's mailboxes are run over by cars. We have no suspects. Every once in a while, someone's license plate falls off, and we actually can solve it because, hey, we got your license plate. You hit that guy's car or you hit that guy's mailbox. But unfortunately, it happens, and we certainly put our best foot forward to try and determine who's committed the crime. In that case, it is a crime to actually a hit-and-run. And so we have a lot of those crimes already that we're investigating. And it's unfortunate in this case that someone's golf cart did run down and hit someone else's car. And you would hope that we wouldn't have hit and runs either, that someone, if they hit their car, would get out and do the simplest thing of leaving a note and saying, I'm sorry, I hit your car.
Yeah, very good. And it would be nice if people would do that if there's an accident. You accidentally back into someone's car or my kids, we went to a minivan for a while because the kids would, the doors would fly open and you're hoping that it doesn't hit the person beside you. I think that's why the Chase has got a minivan for a period of time. Let's take a look at the next one. So this is when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about telephone recordings not being allowed in civil court and why that would be possibly important to include that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. Can't believe it's already the final wrap-up for Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. I really enjoyed, Kevin, John, having you both on today. We're going to try to get in one final question because I'm really thinking about putting this in as legislation. This next one, Why should telephone recordings not be allowed in civil court? Virginia is a one-party notification state, and evidence is hard enough to get for a non-law enforcement person. What's your thought on that, John?
Well, I've got a thought and a comment. My thought is that I have no idea why somebody in a civil case shouldn't be able to play a telephone recording. So that is my thought. My comment is that as a prosecutor, I never deal with civil law, so I'm not an expert in the area and couldn't give you the wheres and wherefores of that issue. But kind of like you, Senator Chase, it makes no sense to me. So,
well, I think that the recording should be judged on the context of the merit of how it was obtained. For example, Virginia is a one-party consent state, which means that you can record a conversation you have with somebody else. But I think oftentimes in some of these civil cases, people actually do something that they shouldn't do, where they actually record a conversation surreptitiously utilizing a device on the house. In a case like that, then those recordings should not be admitted because they're obtained illegally.
Okay, very good. So definitely how it was obtained is very important. So we've only got a few more minutes left. So I just want to summarize a couple of things. I always like to let you all know what I'm doing in the community. This past week, I actually went to the Chesterfield Food Bank. And sorry, I missed you all last week. I had both of my producers unavailable, so we played a recording. But I went ahead and went to the Chesterfield Food Bank, and every Friday night is a great opportunity to serve there. And so I took advantage of not being on the air to go there. And the great folks at the Chesterfield Food Bank right there on Iron Bridge Road, right across from the Walmart. It's a great opportunity to help.
It was packed. I went by there last week, and it was cars parked open there Route 10.
Absolutely. It's a great service to the community. I also attended a Virginia Youth Education Summit. It's actually funded by the NRA, and it's something that Delegate Nick Freitas and Delegate Buddy Fowler and I
Two very good people.
I love them, and we're all Second Amendment people, and we want to teach the next generation the importance of the Second Amendment, and so I thank the NRA for that program. So I participated in that at the Capitol. As I mentioned, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I had commission meetings, and it's interesting. I get a lot of my friends say, "Oh, you're out of session now. Life is laid back for you now, right?" No, it's not even a little bit. I had a commission meeting Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 3-hour meetings. And then I actually Tuesday met Congressman Dave Bratt in D.C., had lunch with him, and enjoyed getting a tour of the...
Another great guy.
Yes, absolutely. And we were at a meet and greet last night in Birkdale for Congressman Bratt. I was also at the Retail Merchants Association last night.
Another great organization.
Absolutely. Richmond International Raceway. So... we stay busy even out of session. We're working hard for you. We're continuing to prepare legislation coming up for the upcoming 2019 session. If you have ideas for legislation, certainly email my office, my contact information. You can do a Google search, Senator Amanda Chase. Go to my official office website and send us an email to my District 11 email address. And we can try to answer your question if you'd like us to answer it on the air, or certainly we'll email you as well. And that's it. So we're going to be back next Friday, same time, same place, 6 to 7 p.m. on WNTW. And I do want to thank WNTW because this is a free public service to you all. And I don't know how many other places in the Commonwealth or other states that they allow you to do this. But I'm thankful for the opportunity to be accountable to the people, to be approachable, and to answer your questions. So I hope you'll tune in next week for more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Senator Chase.